Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor from lovely downtown Ain't No Reason with hurricane season, New Orleans. Although I am embarrassed, I'll point out in a minute to say that in front of our guest today. Also with me, as always, of course, Rocky Messi, still in Charm City, Rocky?
Still in Charm City.
All right. An extended stay in the United States now.
Yeah.
You're going to leave just in time for football season? You get this backwards, don't you?
Pretty much, yeah. I'm hitting 2 preseason games, which
Oh, there you go.
the points don't matter, so it's it doesn't really count. And then I'm leaving the States the week before the actual season starts. Which,
all right.
Oh well, I'll be back in October. We'll catch some games then.
Oh, okay, great.
So, yeah,
great. All right. Well, we're both really happy to have with us here today Ann Kershaw. If you don't know who Ann is, you haven't been paying attention to our profession for the last 12, 15 years. But Ann, for those of you who need the cue cards, is the founder, owner, and managing director of Reasonable Discovery. Did I get that right, Ann?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, and as I said, I felt awkward saying anything about hurricanes because you live in the islands. You just told me you live in the American Virgin Islands, so it's kind of you're at the forefront of hurricanes as they come roaring across the Atlantic. Yeah, and we were comparing horror stories from the building just before we went live here. And just real quickly, for those of you again who don't know, awesome background in our business as an educator myself. I was struck by a couple of things. You were on the original faculty at the Georgetown eDiscovery Training Academy, as I remember. You're currently on the advisory board of the Georgetown Advanced eDiscovery Institute. Sedona, of course, you're on the faculty of, and you can explain it to us a second because I don't want to get this wrong. Academic descriptions are always so convoluted, but you're on something at Columbia University, which we'll ask you to dig into. So just a really great background, not just in consulting, but in education. And so maybe you could kind of tell us, how did you get into this wacky business of ours? Well, what drove you to
because
technology and
I grew
lawyers?
up wanting to do eDiscovery. Yes,
That's right. In the 5th grade, I was building a
statistics.
You know what? Actually, a great intro to that is, what was your first computer? Because what we find
K-Pro,
with
a K-Pro in 19
a K-Pro.
Yeah, in 82 when I was in law school. But I think my first, well, I don't know, we called it eDiscovery back then, but I went to law school at night in downtown Manhattan. And during the day, I was a legal assistant at a financial services firm named E.F. Hutton. And E.F. Hutton in 1984, I think, there were concerns about the delay in cashing checks. It was called check kiting or something. Anyway, we got a subpoena from the Senate Judiciary Committee, and there we were down in Battery Park we had microfiche. All the account documents were on microfiche. And we were doing basically that was electronic at the time.
Yeah.
So and that would have been 1986 or 1987. But then I think I really gravitated, well, I wouldn't say gravitated, but was in it when I graduated law school. I did a 6-7 year stint at a Manhattan law firm. And then when I was pregnant with our second child, our daughter, I started working at a small insurance defense firm in White Plains, New York. And there's a big difference from when you leave Manhattan as a lawyer. You take a major cut in pay, but it's a different lifestyle. But
Yep.
the firm that I worked with, the partner there, he was a real trial lawyer. He did the slip and fall in the parking lot at IBM. IBM, it was headquartered in White Plains. And I think it was, like my 3rd day there, we, started because we represented IBM's insurer. And we started getting all these complaints where people were suing, and we fast forward, we learned, the plaintiffs asbestos litigation bar had decided that their next, money tree was going to be suing keyboard manufacturers, claiming that the design of a keyboard causes carpal tunnel syndrome and other arm. And there were hundreds of these cases. I mean, they were just filing them. And this was before we really had solid multi-district consolidation laws. They were filing these cases in federal court all over the country. And we had a beauty contest with, I think, IBM's main counsel was Cravath. And, Cravath was however many hundreds of dollars an hour, and we were hundreds less.
Right.
And IBM, I learned later, and it wasn't just IBM, it was Apple, it was NCR, it was, you name a keyboard manufacturer, cash register manufacturer, it was all of them. And I later learned that they had all decided, they weren't going to settle. These cases were, in their view, made up. That there was no evidence to show that the design of a keyboard, which by the way was designed in 1860 and nobody else had a problem with it, at least the United States keyboard, but they decided they weren't going to settle. And we knew how I was learning how to try cases, but we were real trial lawyers. And there we were, we won we became their national trial counsel and coordinating counsel. So we hired local counsels across the country. And we were the hub for dealing with the discovery. And so it was great. I mean, it's IBM. So, there you are,
right,
in their corporate offices in White Plains, New York on 44th Broadway. And you're like, hey, can't we make a database or something? Can't we, this is crazy, all this paper. What are we doing? And then also too.
And it's IBM, right? You're a computer company. Come on.
At IBM, right? And I handled all the depositions. To coordinate, all of the law firms around the country. We were able to create. Back then, we were using phone lines, for internet.
Right.
But again, it was IBM, and I learned then from working with the engineers and all the product development folks that I have a talent for technology, and I probably, if I had been of a different generation, would have become an engineer or a computer science person. But women who graduated high school in 1976 wasn't there. But I did, and a lot of these IBMers took me under their wing, and we did some great stuff back in the day before, really most of it was paper. We were scanning, and we were, trying to figure out how to, OCR. I could go on and on and on.
Right.
But we did trials. We did real trial. Our first trial was in Philadelphia in 1996. It was right during the month when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. And then we did trials in Minnesota, and then, fast forward, right around 1997, UPS came to us because we'd been in the papers. We won these trials. It was great. We would, closing arguments, the partner would stand up in front of the jury with a violin and say, people practice the violin.
Right. So carpal tunnel doesn't.
Okay.
Right. That's awesome. See, most attorneys never get that feeling.
Yes.
It's amazing. When you actually talk to someone who's been in a trial, who's won, but just that feeling of trying.
Oh, I have so much more to talk about there in terms of what we've lost because of that, and particularly in this discovery arena. Because, fast forward, UPS came to us, and UPS had just deployed in maybe it was late 80s, but they called it a delivery information acquisition device, a DIAD. They still call it that.
Okay.
The UPS driver just came up the drive the other day with a little one, but the first ones were big. And they were top heavy because the battery was in the top, and they were torquing the driver's hands, right? And so the drivers who are actually, there's several different UPS companies, and when you get workers' comp, you can't sue your employer, but they were suing the parent company and all this complicated stuff, but they filed lawsuits. And that was again, a really interesting road towards technical development, and why was the diet made that way? And when you work for UPS, you as an outside consultant or lawyer, you have to go out on a package car for a full day.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Nice.
and my
That's awesome.
day was January 12th, 1998, I think, in Queens, New York. One of the biggest UPS distribution centers in the world, right? And this place is so big. They have to like start the trucks like in sequence, because if they start all the trucks at the same time, we'll all die of carbon monoxide.
That's crazy.
And yeah, and I, I was with a guy who, he had his route in Queens for 30 years or whatever. I mean, I saw parts of Queens that you wouldn't know. But I learned like that job, those doors, they're heavy. Those, it's a hard job. And
Yep.
what was happening is that when we looked at the profiles of the plaintiffs and you looked at everything that was going on, is that they were getting old and the bodies were breaking down, and it really wasn't the torque of this computer. But anyway, we did a bunch of trials with that. I mean,
Right.
our first trial was in Seattle. We brought, and then we also did one in Portland. You probably know UPS has started in the Seattle area.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. We brought a truck into the courthouse, into the basement of the courthouse.
Really?
We had the jury go down and like feel how hard it is to open and close those doors, and
Nice.
deal with the
That's
back
awesome.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And of course, and we also had, arbitrations, and, we had a lot, but I got a lot of experience with that. And, it really puts a different lens on the whole litigation process. So I see people now, and, we can talk about this, but, they start from.
We're going to settle.
Well, just,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, well, there you go. That's how I got it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually, okay, before we go, I want to go back a little bit even further, because, you talked about how STEM and technology back then, for a woman to go into technology wasn't the norm. But even going to law school in the 80s, it wasn't necessarily like that was the norm. That, at that point, it was probably 70% men in law firms, at least in big law firms for sure. What made you decide that you wanted to do law? Like, was that something, forget about eDiscovery, but just law in general? But like growing up, was that, and where do you grow up anyway?
I'm from Dutchess County, New York.
Okay, so you grew up in the New York area.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm.
Cool.
My father was there's a whole long story about the farm, but he did start a business delivering number one fuel oil to people's houses. And yeah, I come from a long line on both sides of entrepreneurs and small business owners, and I grew up in Clinton Corners, New York, where, basically almost everybody had a small business until IBM moved in, and IBM in the Hudson Valley. IBM basically, took over all of the like Wappingers Falls area, and, and a lot of farms started selling out, and there were developments being created, and it made sense to sell them heating oil. But yeah, and why did I go to law school? Well, I knew I wanted to have my own something, and I didn't want to be a dentist, and I wanted to be able to, go where I wanted to go. And I figured out a way to, work and go to school, and I got the loans. And, it's hard going at night. When you go at night, it's 4 years. And, it's tough stuff. I mean, I remember on my lunch breaks, going and hiding in the stairwell of the 40 Broadway to just, figure out what I was going to have to do for class that night. I mean, I couldn't carry I lived in Brooklyn, and I didn't have enough money to even take the subway. I used to ride a bike across the Brooklyn Bridge with a backpack to get, and then I'd have to go to class from 6 to 10, and then I'd have to get home again. And so, I used to like, at one point I was ripping apart books because I couldn't carry the whole book. But anyway, when you go to law school at night in either New York Law School or Brooklyn Law School, you're going to school with cops and nurses and people, New Yorkers who are, and these New Yorkers, they then become judges and prosecutors, and it was a great experience on that level. But basically, yeah, I didn't think I had grade level of the law. I was just like, let's figure something out here.
Right.
And
But
luckily,
it's worked out. Luckily, it's worked out, right?
yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I worked hard. I was number 2 in the class. So I did get a job at a Park Avenue law firm, which, I remember when I got the job and I got the letter and what the salary was, I called my father and I was like, this has got to be a typo. There's no way anybody makes that much money in their first year.
Right.
It was right in 1987, right? There was this big salary war, at least in New York City. I don't know what happened anywhere, but anyway, but that too was, you worked. I mean, we did a lot of entertainment related work. So there were a lot of TROs on Fridays because, the idea was to shortchange the other side so they didn't have time to really respond. I mean, we used to have to drive to get the last plane out of Kennedy to, serve the TRO over in LA or whatever, but anyway, it was good. It was good. You learn, you work, you learn how to really.
So when you started doing that trial work, you mentioned the K-Pro. What was the level of technology during that IBM and UPS time?
Oh, let's see. We started having desktops, I guess, around 98. Does that sound about right? In law firm, I mean, law firms,
Yep.
I mean, I remember fighting with partners in the first firm, the lawyers will not have computers in their office.
Right.
Like, what? What are you?
Why not? Right.
Yeah, I've told the story before. Browning said when he first started at Gray Carey, the managing partner came walking by his door and looked in and saw him on a TR-80 or something, and it came in and shut the door behind him and said, Browning, if you're going to do that, you got to shut the door. You can't let the other lawyers see you on a keyboard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
No, it's a
but you also mentioned then in that capacity, especially at IBM, having to go out and get some of the other outside counsel, I presume around the country. What was it like with technology requirements for them, or did you have technology requirements for them? What was that? Yeah. Yeah, you're rolling your eyes.
Well, and the sad
did they have a phone? Let's start there.
The sad part is that, it's still going on. And I have I think you also have strong views about, it's a shame. I mean, I used to be really proud to be, when I first became a lawyer, I was really proud to be a lawyer. And I was really on it about ethics and, all of that I took very seriously. And now what I've seen over the last however many years, it's awful. It's awful what's going on. And it's awful what's happening to the legal system. It's awful that, people don't get any justice. I mean, I could go on and on and on and how broken it is. And I blame the lawyers. And most, obviously not every lawyer is awful, but I mean, the things that I have seen, oh my God, it's and there's no policing of it. There's no accountability, and it's out of hand. I mean, I've caught U.S. trustees working for the federal government lying and, ducking. And I mean, don't get me going. It's not pretty.
Yeah. So, well, we've seen it just this last week. And what was the guy who got caught with the, the Jones case. I mean, the judge admonishing him 3 or 4 times during the damages phase. It wasn't even the trial anymore.
Right.
Stop lying, tell the truth. And where was the lawyer in all of this? Don't get me started.
No, I know. I mean,
we could both, Rocky, watch us both go.
I'm just gonna stay out of this one. I mean,
look, if I was working either at a law firm or in a house at a company, how can I possibly do a good job if I don't understand how they're doing business and how those systems work? I mean, I've got clients where, I'm asking the in-house lawyers, much less the outside counsel. I mean, you'd think that they would be showing up and for free saying, listen, I really need to understand how you run your business and how your systems and databases work to be able to represent you. You would think that would be happening, right?
Right.
How could you possibly do a good job if you don't know that? No.
Yeah. I will say that there are exceptions because,
of course.
I mean,
of course, but
I can tell you my experience at former employer. I mean, the attorneys, they were and it was part of the training when you joined, was not just that you are here to defend the company, right? Or
Right.
take the offensive or whatever it is. You are a business advisor, which
Right.
means you need to understand the business, which means, you have to understand every in and out of what's going on. And they're involved in every, product release and every, when it comes down to time to make a decision about marketing, even the attorneys are on the call, because
I'm laughing only, Rocky, because I was at a conference once somewhere, I forget where it was, but I zeroed right in. There were 2 in-house counsel from Harley Davidson at the
you're zeroing in. I can see that happening.
and we started talking, and one of them told me the first month they were there, they are all required to go down to the, sort of like your UPS story. They're all, everybody, any new hire in the C-suite is required to go down to the assembly line and help somebody assemble a motorcycle. Right. They have to know. He said, how can we handle a case about whether the clutch worked properly if I don't even know what that is and where it fits and blah, blah, blah. He said, the only problem is when we would finish, we would always have a box, like smaller than a shoebox, but a small box with like half a dozen little parts left over. And that motorcycle would be set aside and used as a display.
Right.
In the showroom someplace. But yeah, they were required to understand exactly what it was people in their business did. In their case, build motorcycles. He said it was invaluable when they were having patent disputes and copyright disputes to say, no, that's not how that works. I get it.
I do that. So, and after you finished at the law firm and working on the various different trials, what year did you end up leaving that firm?
Well, there's an interesting story there. So the insurance defense firm that I mentioned in White Plains, they got pretty fat and happy off of all the work that we did for IBM and then UPS and IBM, when we did a trial, they would go and set up everything. They had a whole team that would go into the courtroom, and you arrived and your paper clips were here and everything was, UPS, not so much. And we had a trial coming up and we had to set up a trial site. And I was knocking on the door going, hello, we got to get the trial site. We got to get the final. And I wasn't getting any response. And I had to, I couldn't lie to the client's asking what's going on. So I had to leave. And the client, I quit and I was out walking, trying to figure out how I was going to tell my husband. And then the in-house guy at UPS, this amazing man, he called me up and he said, we want you. We don't want them. We want you. And we're going to find a place. We're going to figure this out. And they did. And it was like, well, where are you, they had King and Spalding. They had, all these big firms that did all this other work. One of the firms was Hunton and Williams, which had a New York office. And while I wasn't thrilled about having where I lived in Tarrytown, New York, the commute to New York was about 35 minutes, but I had little kids and stuff, and I really wasn't thrilled about commuting. But Hunton and Williams, their New York office was in the what's not then called the Pan Am building, which is the building like right over Grand Central Station.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, all right. If I go there, I can just roll out of the train and go up to the 43rd floor and okay. And Jeff Paquin, he's the UPS guy. He said, Annie, you do whatever you're going to do. It's fine. But if I were you, my advice is, they're going to want you to sign a contract. They're going to want you to be of count, whatever, but don't just be an associate. And I'm like, whatever you say, Jeff, that's fine with me. And it turned out to be a really good decision because fast forward a year and a half after Jeff had left UPS and my supporter at Hunton Williams, who was in Atlanta, had also left Hunton Williams. I'm sitting in my office and I get a phone call from the replacement UPS in-house counsel. And he said, Ann, I thought you might want to know that a bunch of partners from Hunton Williams Richmond office were just in here telling us we don't need you anymore because you're in New York and you're too expensive. And I went to the New York managing partner. I said, you have 2 hours to explain this. All right. And then nobody did. Again, I left. I'm calling every lawyer I know in Tarrytown, New York, looking for office space. Because I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that what they did was wrong, right? And so I get an office space with a friend of mine, and UPS, gosh bless them, they called me up and they said, we're sending you 400 boxes of files.
Oh.
And bingo, I was my first law firm. It was my name. It was, I still have it. It's Kershaw PC Attorneys and Consultants. And that's what, and then from there.
What year was that, Ann?
That was 98, 99, 98, 99. Yeah, we did. And then we had this trial. And of course, I needed support. So, UPS was like, all right, can you just, use some associates from Hutton and Williams because.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
But,
from the New York office.
Right. They all fell on their sword and they said, oh, they did all the usual law firm stuff. But anyway, we won that trial. That was the one where we brought the package car into the basement. And then we had another trial and we had a bunch of that work for a while. And then, and then I started building my business and my practice. And then I had a friend who had worked at Philip Morris. She and I went to law school together at night again, and she was at a bar mitzvah. And the general counsel for the parent company, Altria, was complaining about the cost of discovery because they had settled all the AG cases in 96, I think. And he was saying, well, I don't understand why I'm getting all these law firm bills. So my friend recommended that he talk to me. Yeah, I went in and that was like the last week of December of 2000. It was right after 9/11, actually. Anyway, I basically said to him, I will put together a great team. We'll do a great job. We'll do the blah, blah, blah. You'll be my one and only. Right. I said, just let me talk about it. If we do a good job and you're happy, let me talk about it.
Right.
And yes. And so I got to see, we went to, because I had to go see what was going on at these law firms. So it was Winston and Strawn, it was Arnold and Porter, it was Decker, it was Munger Tolles out in California. It was, it was great because the partner, how you doing? And I said, okay, I just want to go talk to some associates. And so I would go into the basement where all the document review is going on. And I'd really get to see what was happening. It was really awful. At one point, I think we calculated that they were spending $30 a document to take it because they had all these levels of review. Anyway, we recommended to build an in-house litigation support center in Richmond, Virginia. And that was, by the way, guess who Philip Morris and Altria used in Virginia? I'll never forget. We had to go in there to do an analysis of what was going on with their documents.
They must have loved it. They must have loved it.
I'm in the cafeteria on the 6th floor, right? I'm reaching over to get a salad thing from the salad bar, and I look up, and there's the partner. The guy dropped his plate. Oh, that was great. I was like,
what are you doing here?
Hi, remember me? The one lady you tried to throw under the bus?
Yeah, anyway,
that one. For no reason. So yeah, we built a litigation support center for Philip Morris and Altria, and that was great. I learned so much because we had to get the space, obviously, but then we had to do all of this. What really? How did we want to deal with documents? How really what could we do? What was cutting edge? That's right around 2005. Was we had already opened the litigation support center and we had things running. But that's why I did that. My first study of a technology assisted review and standard document review was in 2005 with H5. And I did that because I really needed something to show all the law firm lawyers who were all, doubting Thomas, and they were all calling the in-house lawyers saying, oh, you can't do this, but we could, But
what were you using for technology there? This is pre-internet, I'm assuming. So you're
by now we're at
5.
Yeah, we're at 2003, 4, 5. So we're getting. I think what H5 had at the time, if I remember, the problem back then was, as you know so well, right, that there was no really good indexing technology.
Right.
So,
which really came down to computing power. The technology was the base technology was actually there. The issue was that you couldn't scale it high enough to actually index at the speed that you needed to.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
No, and it was a problem. So, you were really just, left with fielded data. I mean, it drives me crazy when I hear people talking about coding. It's like back in the day, we coded because we didn't have any other way to
Because
go
we had to,
find it again.
yeah.
Nowadays, like, save search, all kinds of things. Like, why on earth are people still coding documents? I mean, because it's profitable, I know, but,
Yeah.
but yeah. No, it was interesting. And, lots of ways to, be better at privilege review, all kinds of things. But, yeah.
What kind of so let's get into the studies a little bit, and only because we are rapidly, like always, we're going to end up running out of time here because
he always starts off by saying, I don't know why he booked an hour and a half, and then it's now we're running out of time.
Right. But let's talk about the studies that you did. What kind of feedback were you getting from the market? In terms, because that obviously the study was one of the first things that came out to actually, show the difference between using technology in review versus just having attorneys go through one by one. And it was pretty telling. And even though, yes, sure, the technology's changed and mostly for the better. Mostly, but a lot of people were I remember were upset. We're like, there's no way that can actually be true. The data must have been skewed. Oh look, she probably didn't do XYZ and wasn't caring. Was looking at it superficially. I mean, what was your reaction to the market reaction then?
I don't know that I really paid attention to that, really.
Okay.
I mean, I was, involved with my work and building my business, and people who were, being negative about it. I mean, I just figured, well, they're going to lose out. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I've since had to do more studies.
Yep.
And, I've since, there's a lot that's happened, but this trend of the legal world, just, not getting on board, and the reasons for that, there's a lot of, I've listened to some of your other interviews, and that's the hourly billing, the profit incentives, the conflicts of interest. I mean, I could go on and on and on why, it's why they don't, whether purposefully or just because of the way the structure is, not getting efficient. But so, for example, I see so many lost opportunities in terms of being better and more efficient at discovery. So nowadays, now the indexing problem is solved, and we can do screen share interviews and all of these great things. We can go back to, in a way, the way we used to do it before. We go to people's offices and say, we've got this lawsuit and this is what it's about, and can you show me where your files are? Now we do the virtual of that. And if you do that, like right when you know that there might be a legal issue, even before you get the complaint, right? And you go and you find the facts and you ask them to share the screen and show me how you'd look for that and where would you put it? And, you could go on and on, and you get the core relevant stuff and, work your way out. And as you're doing that, you're becoming a full bottle of knowledge of everything that you need to know, and saving a ton of money along the way. And by the way, why wait for document requests? You
Right.
get so much leverage if you just find the core relevant stuff and turn it over. Back in the day when I was growing up as a lawyer, if they don't ask you, don't tell. If they don't, no. Nowadays, if you just give it to them, don't wait for a request.
Right, you're going to have to give it to them anyway at some
point. And if you do it soon and you do it early, you're on the high ground. And then when they do ask for everything under the sun, you get to say, okay, but I gave you stuff.
Right. So we already started that. Yeah.
Else, right. And when they have to say what else, they have to give you names and dates, and you get information about where they're going and what they're thinking about. And, there's all kinds of benefits to do it that way. Yep. And 8 out of 10 times when I get a phone call, it's too late. They've already defaulted to the same old process. And I can give you examples. Like, so for example, you have a class action against a car company involving, I don't know, spark plugs or gas caps. And, all the lawyers are going to agree that they're going to use search terms, spark, gas cap, whatever. Well, when you actually talk to people and you understand it, and they're collecting email and they're collecting documents and they're agreeing to these stupid search terms. When you really do it right, you find out that actually they have a dealer system and they have a database. And when people have problems with spark plugs or gas caps, which they don't call spark plugs or gas caps, they call them part ABC and part XYZ. But when that happens, it goes through a system, a dealer system, and gets reported to a particular place in the company where people do particular things about that issue. People aren't talking about it in email. If you go into email and documents and you search spark plug or gas cap, you're going to get all the marketing literature.
Yeah,
right.
And they're going to review it and they're going to produce it. I mean, it's insane, right?
But it's irrelevant. Yeah.
Right. It's totally irrelevant. But, you know, and that is such a lost opportunity, right? And it's just because, you know, it's, and I could go on with so many examples. Yeah. It's a shame. It's a shame because
it's really funny because it's one of the things whenever, you know, people are asking me about Office 365 eDiscovery and, you know, how we did things. A lot of it was centered because, especially, you know, even before Microsoft had all the search technology really built in, was about preservation and hold, right? And the question was, okay, well, are you holding everything? No, we did old-fashioned lawyering, right? You went, you talked to people, you figure out what are the, and they're like in shock because they're like, wait, but the technology just lets you put everything on hold. And we're like, okay, but that's not the goal here.
Right. Why do
the
you
goal
want to do
isn't to preserve everything. The goal is to preserve the relevant content. So you find out where the relevant content actually is. You know, it's,
you know, that process,
that way, and they're not taught that way anymore. And that's
it's a shame. It's a shame.
But isn't that what you just said, Rocky? But and more to the point, what you described, and you mentioned the word being proactive. Isn't that why the shift is happening that we're seeing to the in-house counsel and the corporations taking over this process to the detriment of law firms? They're losing that business.
Well, it's not to the detriment. Listen, law firms aren't suffering, right?
Well,
I mean, although I just saw a report this morning that they're guessing that in the newest release of earnings that there's going to be a little bit of a downturn. But in general,
not suffering, but not efficient. I think Ann's point was not as efficient. The process isn't what it should be. And corporate clients, at least what I'm seeing, is they're getting kind of, well, wait a minute. I don't want to say they're fed up with it, but they're kind of going, well, I can do this.
Right.
I've got the documents. I've got a robust IT staff. I can be proactive and drive that bus. And so the focus is shifting, I think. Tell me what you think, Ann.
There's a spectrum. I mean, I find that the older companies that have been around for 100 years, you know, like I've done work with American Express, I've done work with Prudential Insurance, you know, all those older companies, you know, they have sort of an entrenched culture that can be hard to change, right?
Right.
I find that the newer, younger companies that I've worked with, like Via, they tend to be more nimble and more on it that way. And it's interesting, and I saw that at Philip Morris too. I mean, you know, some of these companies, they don't have a lot of turnover and there's not a lot of new blood coming in, right? So you get a lot of, you know, oh, we're going to do it that way because that's how we do it.
We've always done it, snapping their suspenders.
It's like, and people don't want to tell the lawyers they're wrong. The IT people tend not to say to the lawyers, that's dumb, right? There's this reverence that, oh, the lawyers said we got to do this, you know, and it's a problem because a lot of things that they're asking for are dumb. They don't make any sense.
But again, it gets back to the original point of if they don't understand the business and they haven't focused on what is actually happening and what's really needed, they're going to ask for dumb things because they just don't understand.
Right. So, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and I see, again, missed opportunities because, you know, they say, okay, well, the business people will get me what I need. The business people will pull it out of the database. Except that if you really think about how that system works, HR is a great example. You know, you can use that data to your advantage. No, we don't fire people routinely over the age of 65 of color. I mean, look at our stats, right? But these lawyers, they don't even know that they can get that.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
It's a shame. It's a shame.
Yes.
So what do we do to change that? What and what have you been working on to help there? I mean, obviously it's very good for your business in terms of as a consultant, as a lawyer to help companies understand what's going on there. But overall, as an industry, Like Tom mentioned at the top of the call, where you're involved in a lot of different organizations, and what are some of the things that are specifically being done that you're involved in to help there?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I honestly, I feel like I've kind of given up. I mean, when people started calling eDiscovery an industry, that's when I started like, whoa, what's happening here? I mean, and people try.
Rocky's sick of hearing me say that. Yeah.
But people try to see
profession versus industry. Yep.
Yeah, and they talk about cases like they're all the same. I mean, every case is different, every client is different, every part, it's all different. It's all got to be, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little voice in the corner at Georgetown. The course, I don't teach at Columbia anymore, but for many years I taught a course. It was interesting. It was one of the first hybrid physical online courses, and it was called Information and Technology Management. And I did a big effort to try to recruit law firms to send associates, because they could do this and learn, basically, all of that information and show the value of systems. And, but it's law firms, it's like, yeah. But I think we got a few, but it's a hard problem. I mean, you look back historically and it's going to change, back before COVID, I was doing virtual stuff here from the Virgin Islands. By the way, I have to get a quick plug in to go do an internet search for the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority and Economic Development Commission. It is a great place to start a business. There's great tax incentives, et cetera. There's a tech park and great internet. But I started doing everything virtually here in the Virgin Islands. And, you get these, the in-house people were fine, but they couldn't figure out the difference between the phone and the computer sound. And there was all this, and COVID hit, and all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So something, I have faith that, something will happen, that'll, I mean, even we had to get the federal rules amendments. That made that was a big help. We could still use more amendments, but yeah, I don't know. That's a big beast, the system is pretty.
And what about law schools? I mean, you mentioned it kind of parenthetically earlier, but we're not learning any of this, or law students now are not learning any of this stuff in school, right? It's almost like you got to teach yourself when you get out.
Well, and luckily there's plenty of ways to do that now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other shocker. Like, all right, well, it really doesn't take that long to go see what Office 365 is about. So, just
right. Go do it, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's I've got a thing going on now with a bunch of young associates, and yeah, they at least they go out, they go learn it, right? I mean, they'll go figure it out if they have to, but it's a shame. Cardozo was going to start a program a while ago, but I don't think anything ever happened with that.
Yeah, I've heard of lots of law schools start talking about it, and then, it just kind of peters out. I was talking to Bob Eisenberg a couple of years ago before COVID, and, he had some school he was talking to, and they all get excited about it, but then when it comes to like, okay, let's push it over the goal line.
Put some money in there and actually figure out what we're taking away in order to they walk. Yeah.
Well, Mike Arkfeld started something, and there's been a couple, but even like the eDiscovery certification and the other, when you dig in, it's just this very, now I believe, I mean, it was new stuff 20 years ago, but it's now dated. I mean, like, it all assumes this kind of big collection of stuff that, then you're going to use some kind of technology and document review to get through it. And, I think because it's very profitable, the way that what I'm talking about, to get the core, read it and work your way out with talking to people. That doesn't make a lot of money for people.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Tom, any questions before we hop into?
Oh, no, we could go on. We can talk all day about this stuff, especially the last issue of the education and learning. And I forget who it was who said it. I don't think it was Mike Arkfeld, but it might have been Judge Monty Ahalt, who was a local judge in Maryland. And he was an early technologist. He said, we're the only profession that does anything by looking in the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
You're asking people to be progressive who are not by nature or
Yep.
by business inclination, looking
Right.
forward, right?
Everything's
Right.
based on precedent. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, and the thing is that, also if you understand, if you do it the way I'm talking about, where you talk to people, you understand the data, I mean, I had a case where, what I'm saying is you can speak to it and you can defend it as a lawyer. I mean, I had a class action case where, because we did it what I feel is the right way, we produced 100 instead of 100,000. And the other side went ballistic. Like,
Yeah.
there has to be no
Right,
documents. And
Yeah.
I could step up and I could say to the judge or magistrate, whoever, look, I know we got the right 100, we don't need 100,000 because I talked to so-and-so, I did this, I did that, I read this, I saw that, and I could explain why what we did was right. And you know what? All good.
That's
No
it.
problem,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of reasons to do it the right way. Sorry.
Okay, so I've got a couple quick questions for you. The first one is one that I ask a couple different people, and I'm curious because you're living in the Virgin Islands. So the question typically is, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be? And I'm assuming the Virgin Islands is a pretty good place to live. But is there anywhere else in the world outside of American territories that you would want to actually set up shop?
Oh, I don't know. There's so many great places. Italy. I like going up to the Dolomites. We ski there with a group. I really need to get to Ireland, so I don't know, but
Okay.
I can sense I've got genetic pull.
Great country.
So I
People there
probably-
are wonderful too. People are just
Yeah.
wonderful.
I don't know. It is wonderful. Living in the Caribbean, is made possible because of the internet.
Right.
And it's great to be in a place where, I get to do a lot of volunteer work and a lot of work with respect to, just education for kids. I'm involved in a museum here, a local museum where we do a lot of great art and music programs for kids here. And, there's a lot going on. When you live in a place that has, slavery was for 250 years, right? And slavery was abolished here, I guess, 40 years before the mainland, but it's still all of the inequities and all of these historical things that they just go. I mean, it was so great. 5 years ago here, they made a law that if you go to high school here, you get to go to the University of Virgin Islands for free.
Mhm.
It's a huge leg up that is centuries overdue, and it's wonderful. And you can see to be part of seeing the results of that. And it's more complicated than I just said. It's a certain income level, and you have to do an internship. You have to be
Still,
involved.
yeah.
But it's
It gives opportunity.
It's a game changer.
Yep. What's your favorite book?
Oh, I love history. I'm a big history buff. I love Island at the Center of the World, of course, because I'm a New Yorker, and I think I have ancestral DNA in every borough of New York City and every county along the Hudson River.
Yep.
So that's Russell Shortow's book. I also, there's another great New York City book called, what's it called? It's called,
I'm assuming not Gangs in New York, but
it's about immigration, but another great book about history, and again, and into healing the racial divides. There's a book by Carol Anderson called White Rage, and anyone and everyone who is part of the United States of America needs to read that book, because it is a factual book about actually what really happened. And people, it's stunning how many people didn't get that education and need to get it, but it's a great book to read or listen to. It's also an audiobook.
cool. What advice would you give your younger self?
What advice would I give to my younger
One
self?
sentence. One sentence.
One sentence. Be a bit more careful about trusting the legal system. I went in all in.
Okay.
I feel I got burned.
Okay, last one. What is the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten?
Weirdest thing that I've ever eaten. Oh, it has to be something from down here. Probably conch. Or,
Interesting.
yeah. What else do we go? Well, goat's not so weird. I had goat.
No. Okay,
Yeah.
conch
Yeah.
is a solid answer.
And that's something
It's
I
not one
really
we hit
miss.
here.
Jimmy Buffett, Jimmy Buffett has his margarita chain, which is owned by somebody now, I don't know. But they used to have one here years ago in New Orleans, and they sold conch fritters, which
Yeah.
were just delicious. And of course, since that place closed down, nobody else sells them. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, Tom, your turn. Rapid question.
One question and one question only. Stones or Beatles?
Oh yeah, I heard you ask somebody else this one, and everybody says Beatles, so I thought, oh, I'll say Stones.
There you go. That's all right. We're
I see
still in
where
the
we are,
vast minority.
I understand, our history means nothing. It's fine.
So the last question that we ask everybody, and we let you know about this, but if you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, living or dead, who would that person be, and what would you do?
Well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, obviously, but I'll say actually Thurgood Marshall. And
Ooh.
I would want to spend a day with him asking about his strategy in arguing Board versus Brown of Education, and how he got them to reverse Plessy versus Ferguson. And because I think we're going to need to do that again. I think we're going to need to, he somehow convinced those justices that human rights are constitutional rights. And we're going to need
And where is he today, right?
Yeah.
If you ever spend any time in BWI Airport, if you happen to have a layover there, they have a wonderful I think it's between the two terminals, a whole Thurgood Marshall exhibit. With just big glass cases with really good exposition of his history and some
got his voice going all the time, talking a couple of decisions.
Really well done. Really well done.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's a hot tip.
Yeah. Okay, well, Ann, thanks so much. It was a great pleasure having you here.
Thanks.
Rachi and I are looking forward in another week or so, and anybody who's listening, if you're going to be there, come find us to the ILTA conference. So I don't presume you'll be coming up for that, right? Why would you leave the Virgin Islands to go to a legal conference, right? New York in the spring, legal tech. I mean, you come up for that? Where would we see you in person if we were likely to run into you someplace?
Well, I try to get to the Georgetown, of course, because I'm
the AED, the AEDI, the Advanced eDiscovery.
In November.
Yes.
But I used to try to get to a lot of things. I used to always go to the ArcFeld conference at Arizona State University because I like the ones that are educational and are not just about pitching and vendors marketing, and I like that stuff. But honestly, since COVID and everything, it's changed.
Right.
I'm just not so quick to get on a plane anymore.
Oh no, I this ILTA conference coming up in a couple of weeks will be the first one I've gone to in like 2.5 years. In fact, Rachi, the last time I was there, wasn't it? No, that was in Georgetown. That was the AEDI. Yeah. You and I and Gail, my late wife Gail, had a wonderful evening sitting out in the courtyard smoking cigars and talking about Israeli politics. It was great. And I snuck in last year to the AEDI. It was at that hotel right near the campus. I remember Craig Ball and I flew in like on Thursday afternoon and left Friday at noon. But I just wanted to see some people, right? It was the whole, that was a good one. Were you at that one last year?
No.
Yeah, somebody paid for, I forget who it was. One of the law firms, I think, did a big reception over at the Dubliner up by the train station. And it was just like, 200 people who hadn't been out of the house in a year.
Right, partying it up.
It was great. But yeah. So that you're right. That's a great reminder. Thanks, Ann. I'll try to make
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I'm hoping to get there this year. I gotta see
Yeah.
what's going on. I got kids getting married and I got, stuff.
Right.
Yeah, get life.
Yeah.
Life.
Exactly.
Well, thanks
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Yep.
Keep us posted on that
Thank you both.
if you do make it. Great talking to you, and again to all our listeners and viewers. Hope to see you at ILTACon 22 in National Harbor on the 21st of August, I believe it kicks off. Yeah,
Sunday,
thereabouts. Look it
Sunday
up. It's on the
21st
internet.
is the opening thing. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Yep.
It'll be there. Just look for the two guys sitting out in the lawn smoking cigars. That'll be us.
Yeah. Well, thanks,
Thanks.
Ann.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Ann. Really
All right,
appreciate it.
talk soon.
You bet.
Yep.
Bye-bye.